Hello and welcome to new viewers. First, a plug, not because she's a sponsor, but because I really believe in her. The Wise Therapist, and you can get the details there on the back. So if you go to www.thewisetherapist.au, and she specializes in positive psychology. Now, this video is going to be probably really hard for me. It's going to come not from a prepared speech, and at times I may go off in different directions, but it's going to come from the heart. And it's going to be long, so I've got a trusted cup of coffee with me to take breaks as I need to. I've got all my little pictures and things that I need to show you, and I beg of you, please do me a great service and stay with me for as long as you can, because I promise you, for one lucky viewer at the end, I'm going to offer something wonderful. Today marks 3 years since my beautiful husband died. I'm going to tell you his story. Now, first, before I tell you his story, I need you to know that I met him when he was 23 and I was 43. Within 6 months, we were married. So anything before 23 is pure conjecture, could be fiction, it could be the alleged truth. I don't know, because all I have to go on is what my husband told me and what I got to observe and experience as his wife later on in life. In this story, in his stories, he's made some not miraculous but amazing claims, and we are going to investigate whether there could be truth to that or not. But if there is, he one time was a pretty badass. Rob, or Robbie, and as I like to call him, was also nicknamed Smurf, S-M-E-R-F, and that was because of his short stature. Now I'm just going to pause here and show you a picture of Rob in his last days. And throughout, I don't know if you can see this very well. Can you see that? That is Rob in a permanent vegetation state. So I want to warn you that this book, this story that I'm about to tell you, is not a nice story. It is not a nice story at all. And so viewer discretion is advised, okay? I'm just trying to find the picture of what he looked like just before he passed away. I'll come to it soon. I will find it. We will find it as we go on. Anyway, his full name was Robert Kane Plevy. Robert Kane Plevy was born the 14th of May 1981 in Newcastle. Newcastle is in New South Wales. Now, apparently, his mother, while she was pregnant, was, according to Rob, and as I said, all these things are alleged, and whether they're truth or fantasy, I do not know. But it does explain his small stature. It does explain why he had small organs, very small lungs, and this was all found out later in hospital when he was dying. His mother was an addict. She used everything, and at one stage during her pregnancy, where she was very heavily pregnant, she actually crashed the car into a pole, and I think that was the end of her doing drugs. She was also hung around with a sergeant of arms, a bikie club. Which bikie club I probably was told, but I forget. Whether they were a major player, I forget. Now, she denies all of this, but it's amazing that Rob's half brothers and sisters are, compared to him, giants. And I mean giants. Rob stood at about 5'6", fully grown. Before I had my back injury, I was 5'8". When I married him, I was 5'7", so I was about an inch taller than him. And his sister was easily 5'9", 5'10", with his both brothers over 6 foot. But again, they had a different father. But even saying that, the parenthood, the paternity of Rob is of question, because he claims he looks like this sergeant of arms. He later met this sergeant of arms guy later in life. And the father, who his mother claims to be, her name's Susan, by the way, and the father that Susan claims was also named Robert or Bob. But the interesting thing is that after Rob was about 1, his so-called biological father, Robert, stopped visiting him, and he had other children, and he had other sons, and he named one of those sons Robert. Now, you wouldn't name 2 boys Robert, so I tend to believe my husband, though I'm not saying I believe every claim he made. Now, I'm not sure why, but Rob was, I do believe, born a drug-addicted baby, and I'm not sure exactly why, whether he was unruly. His grandparents, this is grandparents on his stepfather side, so they're not his natural grandparents, claimed he was an unruly child, and he, for portion of some time of his early life, he lived with them. And I do have some photos up the top here. They're pretty poor quality, I'm sorry, but that's a picture of Rob as a boy. Now, at the age, I know very little of Rob's childhood, except of and I'm going to expose how these things can affect people's lives. His sister was, I don't know, just probably a little bit older than a toddler, and his youngest brother had this jealousy streak, according to Rob. And Rob was watching his sister jump up and down on a bed and bounce, and she fell on the bedpost and she fell between her legs, and so she hurt her private parts. She screamed. Her mother came racing in, and the young brother blamed that Rob had interfered with his sister. Rob was... Sorry, this is very difficult for me. Rob was accused of molestation, and at the time, he's quite young, taken to Surfers Paradise police station and vigorously questioned. And of course, the doctor cleared him. But for a mother, I don't think his mother ever loved him. And I'll come to this later. I don't know, again, very much more about Rob's family life, except at the age of 15, he was playing, maybe it was cricket. Again, as I said, this is not only do we have to go off alleged fact, fantasy, fiction, perhaps truth, we're also going off my memory too, which is also faulty. Rob was playing cricket, I believe, and his brother threw a cricket ball and broke a window. And Rob was blamed, and over this incident, Rob was kicked out to live on the streets, though his mother claimed Rob ran away. That doesn't matter. Even if he ran away, I, as a mother, would have been chasing after my son. So even if he had run away, Rob was forced onto the streets at the age of 15. Excuse me, because this is a hard story. Just need to drink some more coffee. I've got my head down because I'm trying to find a picture of what Rob looked like in the last year of his life. Anyway, I'm not sure exactly what age, but around 15, 16, his aunt and uncle, who were Christians, took him in for a while, but this did not last long because he was accused of smoking marijuana when they found cigarette butts. So again, he was kicked back out in the street. And as you know, I'm going through this book and I can't find a picture of what he looked in his last few days, but it doesn't matter because then I get to the end of the story that I'm going to tell you. You know, lucky whoever, you'll see. Anyway, so I'm not sure whether Rob was 15 or 16 and he met this guy. Oh, just before I go on to that horrible trauma, when, again, I'm not sure, I think Rob was about 16 and the girl was 15, and this was his first love. And they were... Rob, as soon as he got onto the streets, he discovered drugs. And I think it was I think they're called Capodex. They're a green and yellow capsule that once upon a time we used to use when I was nursing for strong pain medication, but now it's used in psychiatry. Well, they were used to pop them as pills and get off their face. And one day he popped 100 of them and she decided to pop 100 as well. And he said, I'm going to just go down and play some basketball. He went off to play some basketball and he came back and she was dead. And he ran because he didn't want to be, even though he didn't force her to take the pills. She took the pills herself. He ran out of fear. He was only young. We're dealing with a teenage boy here. And as I said, this video is to the memory and the honour of Rob, and I'm telling his story. Anyway, I later on, Rob's probably about 15, is still on the streets, and he meets a guy who's a bit older than him, a lot bigger than him. Now remember, you have a very small, thin statue of a man. I'm just going to stop and pause and describe to you what Rob looked like in his final days. He looked older than his 30 odd years. He had brown short hair. He had a nose ring that went through the septum of his nose because he was a Taurus. And you think I've got a lot of eyebrow piercings? He would have had about 8 in each eyebrow, and he had this nose septum ring, and he had earrings, 2 ears pierced, and he had tattoos. He had a rest in peace tattoo because he lost a daughter, but that's a later story. And he had tattoos with my name on his arms. So he had tattoos on his arm, on the back of his neck, and on his chest. And that's what Rob looked like. So he's a very thin, tiny man. When he went to hospital, and I'm ahead of the story, I'm just trying to give you a picture, he weighed 43 kilos. So through the whole time I knew him, Rob never got over 50 kilos. So I could imagine that he's probably around the 40 kilo mark when he meets this much bigger. And I think the guy was a few years older, could be even as old as 20. And he got Rob drunk. They got wasted, and Rob and they started watching porn and so forth and so forth. One thing led to another, and next minute the guy forced himself upon Rob. He raped Rob, or attempted to rape Rob. Rob got saved because the guy's father walked in on them and said, "What are you doing?" Sorry, I need to pause for a minute. Hello. And Rob took the moment and ran for his life. And he informed the police, but because he couldn't tell the difference between whether the guy was circumcised or not, because on full erection, and I don't mean to get into, I've got to be very careful here with boundaries, with YouTube. He couldn't tell the difference, so the police couldn't charge or wouldn't charge the offender. So Rob never got counselling for that, but from that developed a hatred for homosexuals, and has claimed to have actually lured and murdered homosexuals. As I said, you have to take Rob's stories with a grain of salt, because he's less than 50 kilos, 5'6", not very strong, very weak. Although later in life, when I'll share what happened to me, when you're in rage, you have amazing strength. And I'm sorry I'm shifting around. This is hard for me because I have a back issue, but I want to do justice to the story. When Rob, I'm not sure when Rob got hooked on heroin, but while he was on the streets living in squats, he discovered speed, methamphetamine, and he discovered heroin, and he paid for heroin in different ways, by stealing. At one stage, he looked after two prostitutes who made enough money to support him and their habits. And anyway, when he was 17, he met a girl called Cindy who was 19. Now, they were too young and they were heroin addicts, so the relationship was very toxic. He claims, this is his story, that she fell pregnant. They were going to get engaged. He actually bought her an engagement ring, and they pawned the engagement ring to get on. And she said, if you don't go and get my engagement ring back, I'm going to leave you. And he thought he loved this girl so much he'd do anything. So he held up, I think, a store with a knife, and he got caught by the police. Anyway, he's now nearly 20, and he decides he's going to clean up his act, and because this girl has, Cindy, who was a heroin addict, had children already taken off her by docs, so he was going to do the right thing, get a job, and he was going to be a father. According to Rob, she bashed her stomach and forced herself to miscarry. Later on, I know I'm jumping ahead parts of the story, but later on Facebook, he found a girl, one of her daughters, that matched the age, and he was so convinced that this was her. Now, if you look on Facebook, Robert Plevey, spelt Plevey, or Trent Stone, those were his two Facebook license, and I've got them both as memorials, and later I'll be going to write on them. But through Facebook, he thought he found his daughter. After he died, I had a friend contact her, and she said that the story had changed, that she actually gave birth to his son, but it was stillborn, and the name was Trent. Now, I find that very interesting because he had another page called Trent Stone. Stone was after me, being my surname, but Trent Stone. Anyway, sometime, I'm not sure how old he is, but it's before I meet him, he serves time in jail for, he was always in trouble for drug charges, but he did an assisted robbery, so an accessory to a robbery, so he served time for that, and he but when I met him at the age of 23, he was still wanted in Victoria on these charges of stealing a bag, or trying to steal back the engagement ring, stealing a bicycle or something when he was 17. And I'll come back to that. So how did I meet him? Well, he was still an addict, but this time he had got clean, because remember I said he was going to raise this child by himself, so he was clean from heroin. He got clean from heroin. And I all praise to him. He did it by just taking a lot of pot, just consuming a lot of marijuana and just bearing it, and he got through it. But when I met him, he was still using every now and then speed, and he was still using every now and morphine, but it wasn't every day. It was just probably around payday, but he was, using pot every day. So he was fairly clean. And we met. He had a girlfriend. Her name was Jane, and Jane and him were staying at my sister's place. Now, my sister, bless her heart, was also, in a way, a pedophile. She had boys. Her stepson lived with them, and he'd bring his mates home, and my sister would get drunk and she would have threesomes, and she even tried to have one with Rob. But I met Rob living at my sister's, when he still had this girlfriend, Jane, and he was trying to do the right thing and give up drugs. He was trying to help Jane, and Jane wouldn't have a bar of it. She ran away one day and he tried to get her back, and she wouldn't come back. She said, no, I'm going to get on. He never saw her again. She cleared out his bank account, and within a few weeks of this happening, we were together. He ended up moving in with me. Within about 5 or 6 months of us meeting, we were married, and I have a picture down the bottom here of us on our wedding day. That's what Rob looked like, and I will show you other pictures. That's Rob and I in good times, and at Thornside around 2007. So Rob came to me very broken. His relationship with his family was broken and toxic, and they didn't very much like me because I'm the older woman, and I came with a lot of baggage. I'm just going to tell you that when he died, we were married for nearly 16 years. At the beginning, Rob was forced to work, and he really tried, and he was a really good husband. And this is the picture of Rob towards the end. That's what Rob looked like in the final years of his life. Anyway, we had a marriage. It wasn't perfect, and we were two broken souls, and we loved each other, but it wasn't till he lost his job with Fisher and Paykel in 2010 that we realised that he himself suffered chronic pain, and he started to steal my fentanyl patches, and he was starting to get off his face every day on morphine because Rob couldn't handle physical pain. And then, so we had a marriage that slowly eroded away because of drugs. We started, both of us, and it was my fault. Rob never twisted my arm. I came into the marriage clean, but I had heard about a friend, and I've mentioned this before on how I started drugs, and I asked Rob about drugs. So it's my responsibility, and I will take ownership for using drugs. But we weren't using that often, probably once or twice a week, but gradually it got more and more and more till Rob was using every day, and at one stage there I was using ice every day. This is towards the end. And what happened, there's also another awful event. Rob eventually got approved fentanyl patches himself. So he stopped stealing, but he started to misuse the fentanyl patches, and he got into bad crowd in Gympie. Gympie isn't called hellhole for nothing. Gympie is in Queensland. It's north of Brisbane, for those of you who don't know. And there was a guy there, and his name was Vicious Mick. He did go to jail, and I'm not afraid to name and shame these people. They knew what one day another guy, Zoe and Mick, pretended that pretended that a friend of theirs, Mal, needed help, and sent Rob around to the place where a whole group was waiting for him, and this Mick bashed him viciously. And this day Rob had decided he was going to give up drugs. This was around 2017. Rob was going to get clean. We were going to be free from the nightmare, and he got bashed for his patch, and he was bashed that badly he thought he was going to die. He had a thing put against his neck, and he was being assaulted that viciously while 20 to 30 people in Gympie watched this go on. They didn't care because they were all drug addicts. Because of the vicious assault, Rob became mentally undone, and he couldn't give up using. I also need to tell you something. I didn't know this because I have mental health issues myself. Sometimes you can't see clearly, and I just thought I had baggage. But my daughter later told me that Rob had a very serious mental health issue. Now, I need to tell you, before I tell you what happened in 2019, when Rob was on ice, when he came down, he had psychosis, and he heard things that weren't there. He imagined things that were not true. But our marriage came crashing down 2019. The police falsely extradited Rob from Queensland to Victoria. Now, you can only extradite people if it is a jailable offence. When he got to Victoria and he was put in jails, they didn't have any evidence. So it was thrown out of court, and the last standing charge was a fine, and you can't be extradited just for a fine. Please give me a minute. Somewhere in Victoria, either in the jails, Rob... Oh, also, I must tell you this. In the last few years of his life, Rob's both arms had got really badly infected, and he still kept putting fentanyl in it because he lost veins. He couldn't shoot up because he had lead-ins factor 5 or whatever it's called, where your blood clots, and he couldn't find a vein. So he was shooting up into affected arms. So somewhere in 2019, he used a dirty needle or something, or he pushed the infections in his arms. He was warned before he went to Victoria. He had bad infections in his arms, and the ambulance said, if you keep shooting up, you're going to lose those arms. But he must have kept shooting up. He came back 2019, early 2020, where I attempted suicide because I thought I was the bad person. I thought it was me, but Rob he was so ill, so septic. It's like being possessed by demons when you have so many germs. And on the 6th of February 2020, he crashes into many cars because he can't drive. He's just lost. He's so ill. He's taken to hospital, put in a induced coma, given 30% chance. 8 weeks later, due to be discharged. He's in a worse place than what he was the 6th of Feb. So the 25th of March, he has a fatal cardiac arrest, and about a couple of weeks after that, I removed life support, and it took him 12 days to pass away. This is what drugs do to you. Rob was a broken man. This is the beautiful, innocent looking man I met when he was 23. This is taken on our wedding day. Anyway, 2012, Rob and I were homeless, and I have some beautiful memories, and I want to share this. Maybe inappropriate, but Rob was the best lover I've ever had. He knew how to please a woman. And when he came back to me in 2020, when they got him well, those last couple of weeks, he was the best version of himself. But during that time, when he came back, he asked me to contact his mother and his family. They wouldn't have a bar. They would have nothing to do with him because he was a junkie. When he had the cardiac arrest, I contacted them because I thought if it was my son, I'd want them to know. And I told them that he was clean, and he was, and that they'd be so proud. And finally, they got involved. But they were so nasty. After Rob died, they blamed me. They called me. They said that I was the shit. There's many assholes in this world, and I was the shit. Sorry for the language. I'm sorry. Please don't ban my thing, but this is what they actually labelled me. I also have to share something else. While Rob was in palliative care in Eastern in Prince Charles Hospital, and my thanks to the wonderful hospitals and to the flight service that flew Rob from 3 hospitals, Gympie, Sunshine Coast University Hospital to Prince Charles Hospital. My heart and gratitude to wonderful who really tried to make my Rob better. While he was in palliative care, a girl by the name of Cara, because I was still living in Gympie, was supposed to look after my 2 dogs because I was away 2 to 3 days. She locked them in a room, had no food or water. They just peed and pooed everywhere. While I was down there visiting my dying husband, she went through all his stuff and stole things. Rob, let me tell you about Rob. Rob was brilliant at poker. He loved competition poker. He loved fishing. He loved watching wrestling. He loved the Bulldogs. The Bulldogs is our rugby league team. He loved Brisbane Roar, is our soccer team. He loved the Lions, which is our AFL, Australian Football League. He loved being competitive. Then the times we played poker against him, the times, and he would go all in, always lose, my poor darling, yet he was so brilliant. He made so many state finals. There are so many happy memories I have of Rob. But Rob, do you know, everyone has a purpose in life. And do you know what Rob's purpose was? To get me clean. Rob died to save my life. I really believe that. And Rob is here with me still because he said to me, I promise I'll never leave you. And I believe he is still here. Now, if you have lasted this long, I don't have enough time to tell you about Rob, except he was a Taurus and he died at the age of 38, way too young. The age of 38, 3 years ago to this day. I love you, Rob. I always will. And I want to thank you. All I have left is happy memories. I just want to go back and something to tell you about what drugs and infections do. I actually had the police out on him for domestic violence. Remember, I said that I would tell you that he had the strength, and we had someone actually staying with us and he thought that I was actually going to be murdered because Rob wasn't there. That was not Rob. But if Rob claimed to have murdered people, maybe that was Rob. I don't know. We have a very famous series called Underbelly, and Rob claimed to have known Jason Morant, and he claimed that he was one of Benji's best mates. I don't know whether this is all part of a fantasy mind, because as I said, it was only after Rob died that my daughter said, did you know that your husband was actually mentally ill? And when I looked back, there were things that I saw that he did, like, I really don't want to go, but he'd eat bits of himself. Sorry to be disgusting, but I just thought that was a peculiarity. Rob was a broken soul who came from a toxic, unloving family. And I'll share this with you. His mother, Sue Plevy, and I'm not scared of shaming and naming because it's the truth. If you go to her Facebook page, she lamented and grieved over the loss of dogs, but nowhere in any of her Facebook does she mention the loss of her firstborn son, Robert Kane Plevy, Robbie to me. So if you have made it this far, thank you. Know that I'm going to Bali at the end of 27th of September to the 8th of October, because we never had a honeymoon, and I'm going to honour Rob. And to me, you know, this will always be. And if you have listened so far, you have done a man a great honour, because there are so many broken souls out there who go down the path of drugs, who get bashed, who get raped, who get thrown out by their family, who are unwanted. But you weren't unwanted by me, Rob. So, if you have made it and watched it this far, I have a book called Coming Clean, Remember Rob, Final Days of an IV Drug User. And they're just some memories and what I was going through in the last days. I will randomly choose a viewer who leaves or shares a beautiful story of their own. So to all the Robs that we have all lost, R.I.P. Smurf, you live forever in my heart, and my family really loved you. And thank you for being with me, and thank you for all the paranormal activity that you're doing around. Viewers, I don't want to bore you anymore, but I'm willing to send you this book. You've just got to wait till I can afford to send it, because if I pick someone who lives in the United States, that's going to cost me quite a bit of money. So yeah, please bear with me, but I will choose the best comments, the one that means something to me. So I'm not going to go off a favorite. I'm going to go off something that means to me. And if you have time, visit Facebook, Robert Plevey, Plevey, and as I'll show you what he looks like again, what he looks like in the last days again, so you will be able. There he is. There's my darling. All right. I know that this has been a long, very long video, and I thank you for your patience, and I do it in memory of Rob. Thank you for your patience. Thank you. Remember, every life matters, and if you have a problem, don't go down the way of drugs. There is plenty of professional help that you can seek, because your life matters. It matters to someone. It matters to me. All right, I'm getting emotional. I'm done. I love you guys. Thanks for watching. Bye. Love you, Rob. Bye.